Hello, everybody, and welcome in to a special edition. We are going to break down the college football playoffs, specifically the SEC, but we will touch on the other matchups as well. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below, and let's jump right into it, actually, and start it out with this game. Texas versus Arizona State. Texas is a 13.5-point favorite. The over-under here is set at 52. So actually a bigger spread here than the Clemson game opened. I don't know if I'll get to what the Clemson game was, which I believe at kickoff was just 14 or 14 and a half. That'll be interesting. But this is the first game on New Year's Day. Matt, I will let you hit off on this first. What are you looking at in this game?
Yeah, so when I look at Arizona State, I tend to think maybe I just respect the Big 12 more than the Mountain West or something like that. But I tend to think Arizona State's going to give Texas a fairly good game. I don't think they're just gonna blow them out by any means. When I look at that Clemson Texas game from a week or however long ago that was, Texas just did whatever they wanted on the ground, almost 300 yards rushing. Clemson was the second worst run defense in the ACC this year, but Arizona State, which it is the Big 12, it's a lower competition. Well, maybe not lower than the ACC, but Arizona State had the best run defense in the ACC this year, or in the Big 12 this year. So I tend to think Texas isn't just going to be able to do whatever they want. I think Cam Skattebo is obviously the key for Arizona State in this game. Dude's got 7 games this year with over 150 yards rushing. But what I think is overlooked, he also has 2 games of 100 receiving yards this year. He's got over 500 receiving yards on the season. He's just been a super dynamic playmaker. And also just the Sam Leavitt, he's been good, but he's just been more of a game manager. He's got, I think, just over 200 yards a game on the season. One 300-yard game this season. It was against Oklahoma State, who I think is, if not the worst, no, they're the second worst pass defense in the entire country this year. And Texas Tech was actually one of his other best performances, which is the third worst pass defense in college football this year. So maybe it's the Big 12 pass offenses. Maybe they're good, making look some of those pass defenses look really bad. But it's also maybe those are really bad pass defenses. So I tend to think Arizona State can give them a game. It's also the other aspect too of Skattebo is you look at the top run defenses in the Big 12 this year. Arizona State was 1, Kansas State 2, UCF 3, and Utah 4. Obviously, Skattebo didn't play Arizona State and he didn't play UCF. And then Kansas State held him to 25 for 73 on the ground. Utah went off, had over 150 yards, I think, in that game. But that's going to be the biggest difference is when he's played the best run defenses, they've kind of held him in check, or I guess the best one run defense has held him in check a little bit. And Texas is definitely going to be the best run defense he's faced all season.
Yeah, 100%. I think his worst game was versus Texas Tech. I think he had 36 yards rushing or something like that in this game. They only had 2 losses on the year. It was Cincinnati and Texas Tech. I'm going to throw out the Cincinnati one because Sam Leavitt didn't play in that game. That was actually Jeff Sims, which is, anyone knows anything about Jeff Sims, he cannot throw the football. He's terrible. So I'm not going to blame Arizona State for that. My thing in this game is this. The game is won at the lines of scrimmage, period. If you saw the first week in the college football playoff, that was the big disparity in every one of those games. The team that won the lines of scrimmage won the game. And every game that I watched, it was a blowout at the line of scrimmage. Every team that won big, they blew out the other team at the line of scrimmage. You saw that in the Texas game. Texas, if they ran the ball more, could have rushed for how many yards they wanted. They could have written it down and said, we're going to rush for 401 yards. They could have done that. Clemson could not stop them. I do agree with you. I think Arizona State will be able to keep them in check more because, it's kind of hard not to. 300 yards rushing is basically what Texas had in that game if you take out the sacks. So, it'd be hard for me to say, you know what, Texas is going to have a better rushing performance in that game because I don't think it's really even possible to do that. But the thing is, what the Big 12 lacks is physicality at the lines of scrimmage. If you look in the past in drafts and everything, if Oklahoma and Texas players weren't getting drafted at the lines of scrimmage, there were very few players outside of that got drafted at the lines of scrimmage. The only guy that comes to mind was Will McDonald from Iowa State. You would occasionally get one of those guys. You'd get a guy from Iowa State or TCU. But Arizona State, might have one of those guys. They don't have four of those guys. So throughout the game, I think they're just going to get worn down on both lines of scrimmage. And I think Texas will be able to do, honestly, whatever they want through the air as well. It's kind of weird when you look at this Arizona State team. They're really good at a yards per play basis and yards overall, but they're really bad at red zone defense. They're really bad at third down defense, and they're really bad at fourth down defense, which that doesn't compute to me. I talked about that on my live show Monday. Why are they good yards per play, yards per game, but they're bad in certain aspects? So to me, I think if Texas takes advantage of the third downs, if they do get in third and manageable situations or third and non-manageable situations, are they able to convert those? Are they able to convert in the red zone? Because if they're able to do that, I think Arizona State will probably be able to move the ball. But will they score touchdowns when they get there? Because I think Texas will. I think we saw that versus Clemson. Clemson doesn't have a very good red zone defense either, and Texas scored touchdowns versus Clemson. When they go against like average or good red zone defenses, they tend to struggle and not score touchdowns. Versus Arizona State, they're not going to be going up against one of those. So I think they're going to be able to score touchdowns. So if Texas allows them to even move the ball, but they're kicking field goals, I think this game gets ugly. I do think it's close for like the first quarter. But to me, this game reminds me so much last year of the Big 12 championship game. Everyone was talking about, can Oklahoma State hang in? And then you saw that speed and versatility that the Texas offense has in real life. And it's, no offense, it's like nothing any in the Big 12 unless you play Texas or Oklahoma. And they struggled with it mightily. I think you're going to see that from Arizona State. I don't think they're going to do it. And it's going to, shock them at first. And I think they're going to get behind in the second, third quarter, and they're going to have to start playing catch up. Like I said, I think the first quarter, the adrenaline will get them in that game. It'll probably be like 7-3, but I think Texas eventually does run away from it. How do you see this game coming from a over-under standpoint and then a spread standpoint, Matt? Like, what's your prediction on that?
Well, to piggyback on the point you made, I don't think Texas does have the receivers they had last year, because their receivers last year were just stupid. Like, they were just loaded, but this is still a better receiving core than Arizona State's probably faced all season. And then the aspect of Jordan Tyson, I don't know if there's official ruling on him, but he is out. Yeah. So, I mean, your 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown receiver, like, that's clearly been their number one option in this offense, is out. I tend to just trust, like, the Clemson game throws me off a little bit because Clemson was able to score some points on Texas. But I don't know. The over under, that's tricky because I could easily see Texas putting up a 30 spot in this game. But like we've talked about, there's been so many games where it feels like, based on the production on the field, if you only saw the stats and you didn't see the box score, like, you're like, yeah, maybe they scored 30, right? Versus A&M, they might have scored 30 in that game. But their struggles in the red zone, they only scored 17, I want to say, right? Yeah. In the A&M game. And then obviously Georgia held them to in the teens both games. But Arizona State is not Georgia or Texas A&M defensively. So I tend to think Texas does kind of pull away in this one, but I feel like we have a game for like maybe 3 quarters or something like that. But I don't know, in terms of over under, I'm probably going to take the over, and I probably would take Texas to cover as well, because I don't know that Arizona State is better than Clemson. Like, obviously they got the 4 seed, but if we're playing Arizona State and Clemson on a neutral site this week, like, I might take Clemson in that game. So I tend to like Texas in like a, not to just blow them out, like I said, but I think they do pull away a little in this one. Maybe like a 34-17 type of game or something like that. Which that puts you, oh shoot, right, that puts me under, doesn't it?
Right, under by 1.
Oh damn. Yeah, so Texas's defense might keep it under. Oh man, I'm waffling here. What do you say?
I'm going to say over, and I'm taking Texas to cover. This game, like I said, just reminds me of that Big 12 championship game, and I think it's just going to shock Arizona State. And I do think they're a solid football team. I'm not saying that. I think they're legitimately a top 20 team in the country. They are not the 4th best team in the country. I would agree with you. I think Vegas would have it. Like, let's say Texas last week was favored by 14 points and Clemson was on the road. So that'd be 11 on a neutral field, most likely. This is 13.5 on a neutral field. So we're probably looking at like a 1.5 spread between Clemson and Arizona State. So it's basically a pick 'em between the two, is probably what Vegas would have it.
Yeah.
Another thing you mentioned, like you said, Jordan Tyson's probably going to miss this game. I think it's like 90% chance. I think he's going to have shoulder surgery. When we saw that with Phil Moffitt, he barely played. He tried to cut it out, but it's really hard to do anything in football if you need a shoulder surgery. And Cam Scadaboo's going to have to do it all. He was, like you said, he's the leading rusher. Well, guess what? In this game with Jordan Tyson out, he's the leading receiver with Arizona State as well. So he's literally, if you stop him, this game's over. Like, no offense to Arizona State, they're kind of a one-trick pony that way. And their defense, like I said, is kind of like putting patches on a ship that's about to go under. That's what it seems like to me. So I think Texas wins this game 38-17. So I'm going to take Texas to cover. I'm going to take the over here. I think we're on the same page when it comes to that. But I do think for the first quarter of this game, it will be a decent football game just because Kenny Dillingham and that coaching staff is really good. Like, I'm not going to say they're not. Kenny Dillingham, they're projected to go last in the Big 12, and he's done a phenomenal job with this football team.
Yeah, for sure. My score was 51 points, but I tend to be with you. I think this probably does go over because I think there is a scenario where Texas puts up 35, maybe even 40 points on Arizona State.
Yeah, and it comes down.
Was it last week? Was it 38-24, the Texas Clemson game?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see something similar to that.
That's the thing, too. Texas had a lot of miscommunication last week. That was the most miscommunication I've seen, and their tackling wasn't good. That I'm going to put on having 2 weeks of rest, 2.5 weeks of rest, and they weren't in the flow of tackling, and that's definitely something that's more of game time stuff that gets you ready for that. Miscommunication, we'll see if they have any issues with that in this game. I can't blame that on the time off. I actually think it should be better at that point. So it's going to be interesting what happens, but we're both going to take the over in Texas to cover. We agreed last week a lot on these predictions, and I think we did like basically 500 in that. So we're agreeing a lot to start off, but I'm excited to watch this. This is only the second time Texas and Arizona State have played in the history of college football. So it's kind of cool. We played Clemson last week for the first time. This will be the second time we play Arizona State.
Not to put you on the spot, but do you know when the other matchup was?
Yeah, 2007 in a bowl game. I forget what bowl game it was.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget the bowl game. I actually just watched a couple highlights on Twitter from that. Texas, I don't know what the final score of that game was. I know Texas at one point was up 21-0, and they fumbled in that game. Arizona State did, and Texas was going to recover it. And for whatever reason, this guy must have lost his mind. He was an assistant coach for Texas, went out and touched the ball. So Arizona State got the ball back. It was crazy. I've never seen that happen. So that was the first time they ever played.
What?
Yeah, he went out and touched the ball. He literally went out and touched it, and Arizona State got the ball back. I remember. It's crazy.
I remember Mike Tomlin. Was it Mike Tomlin that stuck the foot out? Tried to trip the Ravens 2 years ago or something like that. But
yeah, he tried to trip Jacoby Jones.
34 in the Pacific Life Holiday Bowl. It's funny to me how like I was raised on some of these corporate sponsors, and I'm like, oh yeah, Nokia Sugar Bowl. That sounds normal. But I hear Allstate Sugar Bowl. I'm like, oh, these corporate sponsors have just gotten out of hand. The Pacific Life Holiday Bowl sounds normal to me. I think they've changed it since then.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah,
I think it's
Jamal
the Valero.
Jamal Charles. Is that what it is? The Valero was always the Alamo Bowl back in the day, but I don't know. It's changed so much. But yeah, Jamal Charles, 161 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Colt McCoy, a solid performance. Going down memory lane here. I remember Georgia played Arizona State. So this is probably a similar team, like an early game in that 2008 season. Sean had one of his highlights, diving touchdown over the pylon. But yeah.
As a Bronco fan, I always like Sean, so it's always interested to hear about him.
Oh yeah, Sean was my guy. Sean was like the first player. I always say like I'm a Georgia fan since like 2001 because that's just when I start to kind of remember everything. And Sean's like the first player I remember Georgia having that like other fans were jealous of. It's like, where did you find this guy? He was a highlight reel.
Speaking of Georgia,